Hello crochet friends, thanks for stopping by my page again. Today I'm going to teach you how to make pumpkins. In order to make the pumpkins, you just need to get yarn. It could be any weight, any size. Just make sure that you use hooks according to that weight and size. For this pumpkin, I used a weight 4 yarn and I used a size G hook, which is a 4.25 millimeter. You can also use anything up to an I. If you're going to use a J hook or bigger, you're going to want to up your yarn size. So maybe a weight 5 or 6 or even a 7. This pumpkin was made with chunky yarn and this was made with a weight 4 yarn. You'll want to go ahead and get some branches and I usually file them down on the top so that you can make stems, and I just glue them into the centers when I'm all done, so you can have those ahead of time, or you can crochet a little piece and make your own stem with crochet, and then I just use twine to tie onto the stems. So the pumpkins are going to be made back and forth in rows, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, in order to make your pumpkin, we are going to be working in rows. We're not going to work in circles for this pumpkin. So to get started, you always want to leave yourself for the pumpkins. I would go ahead and leave a very generous tail, about at least 10 inches long. And we're going to be using this tail to sew up one of the ends of the pumpkin when we're done. So this will help you to not have to tie a new piece of yarn on in order to tie the top and bottom close. So leaving your tail about 10 inches long, go ahead and make a slip knot and attach it to your hook. Now, when you make a pumpkin, there is no exact size. Pumpkins come in all shapes and size, different colors. So feel free to chain as much or as little as you want in order to make your pumpkin. But for the video, I'll go ahead and just be chaining. I'll chain 8 and we'll get started. But you can chain 10, usually chain about 15. And the height that you chain, I'll show you right here. The amount that you chain is going to be how tall your pumpkin is. If I lay it flat, you can see better. So what I'm crocheting right here is actually going to be the height, how tall it is, okay? So this chain, the shorter it is, the shorter your pumpkin will be. The longer this chain is, the taller this pumpkin will be. So I said I was going to do 8. Let me just see how many I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's fine. I'll go ahead and do 10. I'm going to do 10. You don't have to do 10. You can do 15, you can do 20, you can do 30, whatever you want. It's just the taller you make it, the wider you'll have to make it. So to keep this video short, I'm just going to make mine small. So I went ahead and I chained 10. And again, however many you chain in the beginning is how tall your pumpkin will be. But remember, we are going to squish our pumpkins, so you will lose a little bit of height. So if you like this height, you might want to go ahead and chain maybe 3 or 4 extra, because it's going to get cinched up at the very end when we squish our pumpkins. Okay, so to get started, we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on our first row. So here you have your chain, the front of the chain, and we're going to skip. Remember, if you've taken my class, when we're doing our first row, we're going to skip the very first chain. We're going to skip it and we're going to single crochet into that very second chain. So we're going to go ahead and do if I have 10, that means minus 1 that I'm skipping. I'll have 9 single crochets when I'm done. If you're starting off with 15, you should have 14 after your first row. So we don't skip any other rows, just that very first row. And if you've taken my beginner class, you know why. This isn't really a beginner video, although if you are a beginner and you know the basics to crocheting, you are welcome to try this, because I am positive you can do it. It's very basic. So we have our first row of our pumpkin, which is actually, it's going to go like this. So you're just basically going to crochet a long row, which is going to create the width of the pumpkin. So when you finish that first row, you should have however many you chained minus 1. I'll have 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Remember, you never count the one that's wrapped around your hook because you have not used it yet. So when you finish that row of single crochets, remember at the end of every row of single crochet, we chain 1. Okay, then we're just going to flip it back around. So the next row, row 2, we're going to single crochet all the way across. However, we're going into the back loop only. So if you took my beginner class but you never learned the back loop only, I'll teach you what it is on this video. So normally I would go ahead and go into that very first hole, okay? But we want to create these ridges on the pumpkin. We want these to stand out. And by crocheting into the back loop only, it allows us to create those ridges. So I'm going to take my hook out for a second. If you look at the top, where I taught you to count your stitches. It looks like those little V's right here, okay? The back loop only is the loop that is further away from you, okay? It's pointing that way. So you have two loops. You have one here and you have one there. This is your front loop and this one is your back loop. So when you crochet your pumpkins, you're always going into that back loop only, okay? Normally I'll tell you pick up both loops in the beginner class, but for the pumpkin, just for the pumpkin, only pick up that back loop. So I'm going to go ahead and put my hook back in and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, sorry, I got turned around. There we go. So I would normally be going in here, but I'm going to go only into that back loop right there. And you just do your normal single crochets. And so you're going to be doing the single crochet into those back loops the entire row. And again, I had 9 on my first row. So I should have 9 on every single row. And remember, you don't skip any more stitches on rows 2 and on. It's only that first row. And that's because that first stitch allows your edges to stay straight. It pulls it up and keeps it nice and straight. So right here, I have just finished my second row, okay? So you could tell now it's starting to create these little ridges. When I finish my row, I will chain 1. If you're still new to crocheting, you might want to count and make sure you have the number that you started with so that you your pumpkin doesn't turn wonky. However, I will say that pumpkins come in all shapes and sizes. So if your counts happen to be off a little bit, or if you notice it's not exactly perfectly straight, it's okay, because pumpkins are never perfect, and that's what makes them so cute. So I finished my row. I chained 1. I'm going to flip it back around, and I'm going to go ahead and do another row. And so I'm just going to keep going here. I'm going to keep going, and go ahead and keep going on your pumpkin. Remember, if you guys ever have questions, just comment below my video. I'll get a notification and I'll hop on and I can answer your questions there, or you can contact me the way that you contacted me when we first met. You can text me, you can email me, you can reach out to me through my Facebook or my Instagram, or the Google Class page. I have started a TikTok page. There's just a few things on there, but I intend to eventually do short little videos on there too, along with YouTube. So you guys have many, many ways to get a hold of me. I just chained 1 and flipped it really quick. Sorry, I'm not really teaching at this point. I'm just kind of giving you some tips. But what I am doing is I am continuing to do what I taught you on the first 2 rows. You are just doing single crochets in the back loop only. When you finish your row, you will chain 1 and turn your work. So here's my chain 1, turn your work, and start over. But I'm going to pause. So now if you look, see how big it's growing? So what I wanted to show you is this is the top and bottom of the pumpkin. So you want to go ahead and make this long enough, and that's probably some of the questions you have, is you want to make this long enough that when you fold it in half, it's big enough, it's wide enough to make a pumpkin. So, but again, you know what, you got to make your first pumpkin, and from there you can play with it and see what you like. So I'm going to pause the video here. When I come back on, I'll go ahead and have my rectangle completed, and I will teach you the next steps. Okay, so here I am, and my rectangle is long enough now to where I can go ahead and put it together to make a pumpkin. I want you to notice that what I did was I have my long tail that we started off with here, and let me turn it this way for you. And I went ahead and tried to finish on the same end as this tail, because we're going to do one more row where we sew these together, and I want this tail to end up on the opposite end. That way when we sew it together, I can use one tail to sew the bottom of the pumpkin and the other tail to sew the top of the pumpkin. Otherwise, if you have tails on the same sides when you're done, it's not a big deal. It's just that you're gonna have to get a long piece of yarn and cut it, and you'll have to tie it to the inside of the pumpkin. This just makes things easier for you. So the next step is we need to go ahead and fold our pumpkin in half. Now, most of you will probably have a much larger pumpkin, but for trying it out, for size, you can always start off with something smaller too. That's okay. So what you want to do is you're going to take your pumpkin, and we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and chain 1. And then I'm right-handed. So if anybody on here is left-handed, of course, everything's going to be, you know, you'll sew yours back across from left to right. You know that, but I'm right-handed, so I'm going to do my right-handed video. So what I'm going to do is we crochet from right to left, and we're going to go ahead and just fold this in half. So what you want to do is you want to match up these edges, okay? We're going to crochet across both of them all the way to the end. You do have the option of cutting your yarn, and again, you want to cut a very long tail, and you could put your yarn on the needle and you can just sew the pumpkin together if you would like to. That's another option. I just prefer to crochet because I already have my hook in there. But what I'm going to do is, because this is going to be the inside of the pumpkin, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up just the front loop. So you guys learned how to do the back loop, right? You learned the back loop is right here. We're going to do the front loop, and the front loop means when I'm holding it, it's the loop closest to me. So I'm going to go into the front loop for the top row, and the bottom row is just the chain. So you're just going to go under the part of the chain, and you're just single crocheting across. You're not doing anything new, nothing that you haven't learned. You just want to go in each hole, just kind of match them up and go all the way down. And if you don't do the front loop, if you just want to go under both loops on the top row, that's okay. It's not going to mess up your pumpkin at all. It's just that it kind of gives it an extra ridge when you flip it inside out, and I like it to try and stay consistent with the rest of the pumpkin look. But you don't have to if you're confused by it. I want to keep this simple as possible. But if you do know what the front loop is, then you can go ahead and go into that one. So, and as you're going, I think the most important thing would be just make sure your ends match up. It's okay if the middle doesn't match up, like right here. I'm going to undo that one. You want the ends to match up so that your pumpkin kind of stays, again, it's a pumpkin, so I guess if it's wonky, you know, no big deal. But for the sake of all my other work, I usually try to keep everything lined up. So once I'm done, and once you're done, okay, we've got to the corner. All we did was we single crocheted through both rows at the same time. And then I'm going to go ahead and chain 2 so that I can lock in the stitch. And I'm going to cut I'm going to cut this side a little bit longer than the first one. The first one was maybe about 10 inches. I'm going to cut this one maybe 12 or 14 because I'm going to use the longer tail for 2 purposes. Okay, so now we have what looks like this little round piece of crochet here. And we're going to go ahead, this is the inside because we want that seam that's sticking out. We want to pop it on the inside. So go ahead and flip it inside out, and you'll have to fix your ends, pull them out. Okay, and so now you have this pumpkin, if you can imagine it, right? You've got the start of a pumpkin. This thing's going to get stuffed. We're going to sew the ends together and we're going to squish it, and it's going to be really cute. So the next thing you want to do is I'm going to save the really long end for the top of the pumpkin. So let's go ahead and work on the bottom. Take the shorter. If they're the same size, that's okay. It's just I make mine extra long for the top, and you'll see why in a minute. So how do you close up the bottom of a pumpkin? Let me tell you. You're going to take this piece of yarn, put your needle on it. You may also use the plastic needle I gave you. This one might work easier, especially if your pumpkin is really big. This is longer and it'll reach further through the pumpkin. So you want to do whip stitches across the top. And what that means is we're going to kind of do a spiral sewing around the whole top. And we're going to righties, you're going to do it clockwise. And if you're left-handed, you're going to do it counterclockwise. So you're going to go ahead and wherever the knot is, you're going to start next to it. Lefties will start on the other side, but you're going to start here and you're going to go from out to the middle, and you're just going to repeat this at the end of every row. So if I have a row here, and there's no exact place to go. So don't be hard on yourself if you're thinking, I'm not going into the right hole. There's no wrong or right place. Just go into the very end of the stitches. Every time you do about 4 rows, go ahead and pull on it, and it's going to start closing that hole up. And I'm going to do like 4 more. So if you notice, I'm going from the outside through the middle. That's all I'm doing, from the outside to the middle. And then I'm going to pull on it some more. See how it's starting to close up? So outside to the middle. And if you're not a sewer, every time you pull your yarn, you kind of have to put your hand right here, or the yarn will unthread from your needle every time. You'll figure it out really quick. So out to the middle, out to the middle, out to the middle. And again, I'm going to hold my yarn here. I usually use my thumbnail, and I just kind of hold it and I pull on it, and it helps it to slide closed. I probably have a few more to go. Once in a while, when you finish it, you still have a little gap, and then we just sew it back and forth. So I probably will have to do that. So on the top, I leave mine a little more open. So here's the bottom of it. It's pretty closed, but I want that hole right here completely gone. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of like crisscross. Just gonna go back and forth a few times. So I have a little trick when you're trying to thread your needles. A lot of people can't get the yarn in their needles, especially the metal ones, because they're so tiny, those little heads right there. But if you take your yarn and hide it in your fingers like this, like you can't even see it, okay? Let me fix my camera so you can see better. And all you do is you take that needle and you put it right above where the yarn is, and you slowly open your fingers and then pull the yarn. It goes on there very easily. Of course, I do this like all day long, but try it. Keep practicing, it gets easier. So all I'm doing here is I'm just crisscross sewing that hole up on the bottom because I don't want the stuffing to come out, and I want it to have a nice finished look. So maybe go back and forth like 4 times if you have to. You might not have to. If you didn't have to do what I'm doing, then skip what I just did, and you're going to end up with your yarn and a nice tight bottom of your pumpkin. So go ahead and take your hook, poke it into the inside of the pumpkin, and pull the yarn all the way in, because we do not want knots showing. I'm going to go into the inside of my pumpkin now, and I'm going to go ahead and tie it off. So just put the needle through a little piece of yarn and go ahead and pull, and put your needle back through that loop and just pull really tight. And then try to do one more knot, just leave it on top of that knot. And then you're done. You can just trim it. You could weave it or you can trim it. No one will ever see it because it's going to be stuffed inside the pumpkin. So I'm just going to weave mine a little bit and then trim it. And then there you go. So right now, if you're looking, you've got this little dome shaped, you got your pumpkin, the bottom of it, and then this is the top. Now I'm going to pause right here. And for those of you who want to do beanies and stuff, this would be a way that you can do them, but you would do it on a much larger scale. And you can also flip it if you can see that. You could have like a little beanie with a brim on it. So just giving you ideas there. All right, so now we have to stuff the pumpkin. And one of the keys I would say is don't overstuff it. I overstuff my work often and I end up having to pull it out. If you overstuff it, you might see the stuffing showing through the holes. I did use a size, I used a size I hook. So, and this is a weight 4 yarn. So I'm going to have holes anyways, but I wanted to use a bigger hook just to make it more visible for the video. So I'm going to stuff mine right here and leave it at that. Once you have your pumpkin stuffed to the thickness that you like it at, you can stop, thread the needle again with the other piece of yarn, and we're going to go ahead and do that same stitch across the top. So we're just going to go out to middle. This is called a whip stitch. One trick you can do is take your pointer finger, and every time you have to go into a stitch, push the stuffing down so you don't pull the stuffing through the holes. Otherwise you're going to see stuffing all over your pumpkin and it's going to look messy. So I'm just going around the edges. Okay. And just keep going. And again, every few stitches, go ahead and just tighten that up. See how it's starting to look like a pumpkin? Okay. Keep going. Okay, we are almost done. If you have a bigger pumpkin, this will take you longer. Just pause my video, and then when you are almost done, then you can push play again. So like I said, I'm doing a small pumpkin so I can keep the video shorter. There you go. So I pulled really tight, and here you've got the pumpkin. You've got the bottom we already sewed together. You've got the top that we just sewed together. I do like to leave a little hole because I like to put sticks in mine, but you can also crochet a top to your pumpkin and you can sew it on there. So if you're going to crochet your top, you can go ahead and just pull it really tight. If you're going to put a piece of wood in there, you might want to go ahead and just leave a little hole just so you can stick it in there with a little bit of hot glue. But let me show you now. You have your pumpkin, but we want to get it that little squatty look, right? You've got a round pumpkin. You can leave it tall. And if you like that squash look, I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So go ahead with that same piece of yarn, and you're actually going to go, we're going to sew from the top to the bottom, back from the bottom to the top, and a third time from the top to the bottom, and we'll finish tying it off on the bottom. But when you go, you don't want to go right into that hole because you're just going to go into the stuffing. So catch a little piece of yarn, okay, and then poke it through to the bottom. And when you do this, don't tug too hard, just tug gently. And when you do that, when you tug gently, it's going to cause that pumpkin to kind of squish in, just like that, so it looks squatty. And then you want to go back to the top, but go into a different hole than where you came out of, okay? So you can go anywhere, and then just go back to the top. And again, just kind of pull on it gently, but not too tight. And then we're going to do it one more time. We're going to go from the top, back to the bottom, and this will be the last time. So right here, make sure on that third pull, you kind of pull it to where you really want it. And I'll go ahead and leave mine right there. And to tie off the bottom, same thing as when we flipped it inside out. You want to catch a little piece of yarn to anchor the knot to. If you just tie a knot on the yarn itself, the knot might slip inside the pumpkin, and then your pumpkin might slowly expand and you'll lose that little stretch you did. So make a little loop, put your needle through the loop like you're purposely tying a knot. Okay, don't pull too tight or it'll cinch up tighter than you want it. And then do another knot just on top of it. I use my thumb to kind of hold it in place. That's it. And then I'm going to take this piece of yarn, I'm going to pop it in there and just come out in some random area. Pull hard to hide that knot. And then make sure you always cut up and away from your project. Don't cut towards your project, because as I've told a lot of people in my beginner classes, I've cut my work and had to do it all over. There's your little pumpkin. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to come back and show you how to finish a stem. Okay, for those of you who want to crochet a stem, let me show you how. It's pretty basic. Again, you can do your own counts. You can make it as long or as short as you want. You can make it as thin or as wide as you want. It's just your preference on the stems of the pumpkin. For this pumpkin, it is so tiny. It's nothing like the big one that I had made. I'm actually going to probably go outside and grab a stick and put it in here at the end. But I'm going to make a stem crocheted so that you can see how to do it. So leave a little tail because you'll need to sew it onto the pumpkin. And then you will just go ahead, make a slip knot. And you might want to use a smaller hook for the stem so it's not as big. But I'm just going to use what I had out initially. And then go ahead and chain 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to chain 5. Actually, I'm going to chain 4. My pumpkin's so little. So again, it depends on your hook size. It depends on your yarn size. But go ahead and chain. It's basically going to be the height of your stem. So however many you chain, that's how tall your stem is going to be, okay? Once you chain, I chained 4. So I'm going to go ahead and do 3 single crochets back across because we skipped that first one. Just on the chain row. We don't skip it again. Okay, so I did 1 row. And then I'm going to go ahead and do another row. And again, I'm going to do back loop only on this. And I'm only going to do 3 rows. So the first row, you've got your chain, you've got single crochet, and then I did a back loop only. Actually, I'm going to stop here. Yeah, I'm just going to stop here. And then I'm going to go ahead and chain 2 because I'm going to cut my work. I'm going to cut a decent sized tail. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull the yarn out. So now you have this little tiny rectangle, and you can make, I'm going to tell you, you can make your stem however you want. You can just do a chain and you can attach the chain to your pumpkin. You don't have to do this. But I just made it a little bit thicker. So I have that back loop only. And then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this in half. I'm just going to sew the edges together. I'm going to whip stitch it just like we whip stitch the top and the bottom of the pumpkin. I'm just going to kind of go from one side back to the other side. And you don't have that many stitches to do. I only had 3. You got to be careful that it doesn't tangle on the other side of it. So, sorry. My hands don't want to work today. Actually, I've done a lot of work today. They're probably overworked. Okay, so I just have this little weird looking thing here, right? But that's what the stems are. They're little weird looking things. And so it's going to actually sit right in the top of that hole right there. And then all you would do is, sorry guys, you can use one of these long pieces to anchor it down. Okay, you can see that, sorry. Okay, you can use a long piece to anchor it, and then you would use the other piece. Doesn't matter which one you use. And so if you're wondering how to sew this onto the pumpkin, you would just go through the pumpkin. You catch a piece of the orange, or whatever color your pumpkin is, might be white or black or brown or blue. Catch a piece of that, and then you got to catch a piece of the stem. And you're just going to go around and do this in a little circle. So catch a piece of the orange and a piece of the stem. Your stem might be cream, it might be dark brown, doesn't matter. Then catch a piece of the stem, piece of the pumpkin, piece of the stem. And just keep doing it around. I would say at least like 6 times, maybe 5 to 6 times. Just what's really anchored on there. These are for decor, you know, unless you're making one for a kid to play with and sew that thing on really good. But that's it. And then you got the little stem, you got your pumpkin, and then I would just take this piece, I would try to bring it out the same exact hole that I brought the other piece out. Make sure it's tight in there good. And then take these two pieces and tie them in a double knot with each other. You don't have to tie them with the orange, because here's the trick. We're going to take these two pieces, and if I can thread this with 2 pieces of yarn, yep. You're going to take these 2 pieces, go back in the same hole, and pop out of some random hole. And when you pull really hard, it disappears. And then it's already knotted on the inside. I don't have to knot anything else. Kind of pull extra hard, trim it, and it pops right back inside and you'll never see it. And that keeps your work looking clean. So I'm really big on my work looking clean. I don't like tails. I don't like people or anyone to see where I sewed anything. I just like it to be all hidden, and it just makes your work look professional and clean. And if you can work on that, it goes a long way, especially if you start selling your work, or even if you're just gifting it. You know, I always try to teach people, do the right thing from the beginning and you won't have to retrain yourself later. So there's my little pumpkin. Thank you guys for being so patient. I know that some of you have been waiting for a couple months for me to do this video, and I apologize for the time it took. I've got 3 kiddos, we homeschool, and I have other work that I do. So forgive me in the delay in this video, but I will be putting out more very shortly. So I've got, this is the wood. If you want to put wood instead of crocheting it, I favor the wood now. Just go outside and get some sticks. I took a saw and sawed down some pieces. Make it longer, because you got to hide it inside the pumpkin. So this stem right here is probably about that long. And then I took a sander and just sanded the tops and the bottoms of these so they weren't rough. And then all you got to do is put a little dot of hot glue on the bottom of the stick and in the hole, and just shove it in there and hold it in there for like 20 seconds. That's it, and you'll be good. And then I just tied a little twine around it to make it extra cute. So I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope you love this. Please send me photos of your pumpkins when you're done, because I would love to take pictures and post them for everyone to see. Take care, you guys.